The Siege of Fire and Ice. When Vikings took on a frozen fortress expands into a sweeping epic of courage, cunning, and unyielding resolve, set against a backdrop where nature itself seemed determined to defeat both attacker and defender. This tale begins with the legendary Viking chieftain, Jarl Sigurd, whose exploits had earned him the title Sigurd the Unbroken. Renowned for his fierce leadership and hunger for conquest, Sigurd had led his warband across distant lands, plundering wealthy cities and fortresses, yet he had never encountered a challenge like the one that lay before him now. The fortress in question, known as Jotunhold, named after the giants of Norse mythology, was said to be built long ago by an ancient people, constructed atop a mountain crowned with ice. Located in a desolate northern land where the winters were eternal, Jotunhold's reputation was that of an impregnable stronghold, rumored to hold untold riches and relics of ancient power. Yet, these were not what drove Sigurd to undertake this daunting task. It was the tale of Jotunhold's unbroken defenses that stirred his warrior's pride. For Sigurd, the conquest of the frozen fortress would cement his legacy as the greatest Viking chieftain to ever live. The journey to Jotunhold was grueling and perilous. Sigurd's warband, numbering over 100 seasoned warriors, navigated icy fjords and mountain passes beset by blizzards, where the trails were buried in snow so deep that even the strongest men struggled to push forward. Wolves shadowed the expedition, their howls echoing through the night like specters of death. The warriors, clad in heavy furs and carrying large shields made of iron and oak, trudged onward despite the biting cold that seemed to seep through every layer of their clothing. Frost crusted their beards and eyelashes, while their breath froze upon exhaling, hanging in the air like ghostly vapors. Finally, after weeks of hard travel, they arrived at the base of the mountain where Jotunhold stood. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and daunting. The fortress loomed above like a great frozen monolith, its towers reaching into the sky, crowned with spires coated in layers of ice that glittered like crystal. The walls, impossibly thick, were completely encased in sheets of blue-white ice, transforming the stone beneath into something almost otherworldly. At the base, the gates of the fortress were formidable slabs of iron, bound with ancient runes, iced over with frost that had accumulated for centuries. As the Vikings stared up at the seemingly indomitable fortress, a sense of both excitement and dread coursed through them. Excitement for the battle ahead, and dread for the trials they knew awaited. The first days of the siege were spent preparing for what would be a war of attrition. Sigurd ordered his men to set up a fortified camp at the base of the mountain, using timber hauled from nearby forests. They constructed shelters to shield themselves from the constant wind and dug fire pits deep into the ground to retain heat. Yet, even with these precautions, the cold seeped into the very marrow of their bones. Men huddled together for warmth, their fingers cracked and bleeding from exposure, while supplies dwindled alarmingly fast. Snowstorms battered the camp, and when the gusts blew in, they felt as if knives were slicing through their flesh. Sigurd knew that if the siege was to have any chance of success, he had to weaken the defenders' morale while keeping his own men alive. He ordered continuous skirmishes to test the fortress's defenses, sending small bands of warriors to probe for weaknesses in the walls and gates. The defenders were vigilant, however, and met every advance with a hail of arrows. They had stockpiled supplies and fortified the walls with additional barriers of snow and ice. Anytime the Vikings approached, they poured down not just boiling water, but mixtures of lye and pitch, which created clouds of caustic steam that could blister skin in an instant. Sigurd's warriors retreated each time, but the skirmishes served their purpose. They kept the defenders from resting and hinted at a much larger attack yet to come. As weeks passed, the siege took on a grueling routine. The winter itself became a greater enemy than the defenders within the fortress. The Vikings struggled to keep fires burning. The wood was damp from snow, and the winds extinguished even the fiercest flames. Hunting parties were dispatched to find game in the surrounding forests, but the animals had long since fled or were buried beneath the snow. The once strong war band was now plagued by frostbite, hunger, and sickness. Men's limbs turned blue, and the constant exposure to the elements made even simple tasks like gripping an axe a painful ordeal. Yet the spirit of the Northmen did not falter. They were warriors, bound by their oaths and a shared determination to either win glory or die trying. Recognizing that direct assault was near impossible given the conditions, Sigurd devised a plan as cunning as it was bold. He instructed his men to build great wooden scaffolds covered in hides to shield them from the enemy's view and fire. Under cover of darkness, they erected these structures near the walls, using them to build up mounds of snow and ice. They sought to create a ramp, not to climb over the wall, but to bring their battering ram closer to the gates. The ram itself was an enormous log, carved with the likeness of a serpent's head and reinforced with iron bands. As the men worked day and night, layering snow and pouring water over the construction to solidify it, the ramp grew steadily, inching closer to the gates. The defenders quickly realized what was happening and launched a series of counterattacks. They rolled massive stones down from the battlements, hoping to shatter the scaffolding. They set parts of the ramp ablaze, yet the flames did little to harm the compacted ice. In a final, desperate gambit, the defenders released a torrent of freezing water from above, hoping to sweep the Vikings off the ramp. Instead, the water froze upon the surface, creating a smooth, almost polished slope that the Vikings later used to slide the battering ram into position. With the ram finally in place, the Vikings launched their most ambitious assault yet. Under the cover of a blinding snowstorm, they advanced en masse, battering the frozen gates with all the strength they could muster. Each crash of the ram echoed like thunder through the storm, and the iron-bound gates began to groan under the relentless force. After hours of relentless pounding, cracks began to form in the ice that covered the gates, followed by splintering sounds as the wood within gave way. When the gates finally burst open, the Vikings surged forward with a primal roar, flooding into the courtyard of Jotunhold. What awaited them inside, however, was not immediate victory, but a chaotic melee of desperate resistance. The defenders, though exhausted and dwindling in number, fought with the tenacity of cornered wolves. In the narrow passageways and halls of the fortress, the fighting was fierce and bloody, with axes and swords clashing in close quarters, and the ground becoming slick with ice and blood. The defenders, knowing they had little chance of survival, employed scorched earth tactics, smashing their own stockpiles of food and setting fires to critical structures, hoping to deny the Vikings the spoils of victory. Sigurd, leading the charge, fought his way to the heart of the fortress, where the final stronghold was located, a great hall carved into the mountain itself. Inside, the remaining defenders, including the lord of the fortress, made their last stand. The air was thick with smoke and steam from fires lit to keep the attackers at bay. As the Vikings breached the hall, a fierce battle erupted, and Sigurd himself confronted the fortress lord in single combat. The clash was ferocious, with the icy floor beneath their feet cracking from the force of their blows. Finally, with a swift and powerful strike, Sigurd brought the fortress lord to his knees, claiming victory for himself and his warriors. The fall of Jotunhold marked the end of the siege, but the cost was staggering. The fortress lay in ruins, and nearly half of Sigurd's men had perished, not only from the defenders' resistance, but from the relentless grip of winter. Yet those who survived had achieved something extraordinary, defying the elements and conquering a fortress once thought invincible. As they lit the fires that would warm the halls at last, they knew that their tale would be told and retold across the Northlands, not just as a tale of conquest, but as a saga of survival against the harshest odds. The siege of Jotunhold became legend, its frozen walls stained with the memory of fire, blood, and ice. It stood as a chilling reminder that even in the coldest and most unyielding of places, the spirit of the Northmen could ignite a blaze that would be remembered for ages to come.